My wife and I have 4 children, and during the time we were expecting each one, I built a marionette show. When we were expecting our daughter Elizabeth, I was trying to decide what show to do as sort of her show in honor of her. And I had whittled it down to either Great Expectations by Charles Dickens or Aladdin. And I went back and forth as to which one I wanted to design and produce as a new marionette show. I finally decided on Great Expectations. But Aladdin, it was hard for me to leave that show behind, or that idea behind. I'd grown up with the fairy tale, and I loved the story, but as I really thought about it, what I really loved about Aladdin was the design that would be required to bring that story about. I still was intrigued with doing a play that had a lot of color and texture in the costumes and the atmosphere, and I had just loved that about that story. And so I just kind of put that whole desire to create that kind of style of show just kind of on the back burner. And as we moved through the 1990s, I designed other plays. I kept coming back to Russian fairy tales because they kind of had that same thing going on with color and texture. And this, again, just from a design aspect. And I began reading Russian fairy tales to see whether maybe one of them might really be a great marionette show. And there are a lot of Russian fairy tales out there. And they have very interesting characters, interesting plot lines, and the Firebird kept coming up. You know, it's a very, very famous story thread in Russian fairy tales and folklore. To say it's just one fairy tale is not really accurate, because the Firebird as an image or a character shows up in many, many fairy tales. Somewhere in there, my parents gave as a present to my wife and me a plate, a Russian plate, showing a scene with a wolf flying across the sky with a prince and princess on his back. And it took me a while to connect that was actually a scene from the Firebird. And again, as I looked at that illustration design with the costumes and the color and the texture, I thought, as a designer, I want to go here. I want to explore this style. And I decided to use the Firebird tradition of stories kind of as the foundation for this. But I had a lot of stories to choose from, because within the Russian tradition there are a lot of versions of this adventure with different characters. Usually Ivan is there. Ivan is the young prince who is sent forth on the quest to find this Firebird, which has been stealing his father's fruit off this tree. And the father is the czar of this kingdom. And Ivan usually has at least 2 brothers who are in competition to get the bird. And so I knew I wanted Ivan, I knew I wanted the brothers. There was a princess usually that came up in the versions of the story. I decided to use the character of Vasilisa as the princess in my version. What is interesting about so many of these Russian fairy tales that explore this particular storyline is that there is also a friend that helps Ivan out, you know, right from the start. And not only is this friend nice and helpful, he is also very versatile, because he can take the form of many different kinds of creatures to maximize how he helps Ivan out. When he is the wolf in the frozen wasteland of Russia, when Ivan is basically lost, the wolf is offering his back and can fly Ivan across the frozen lake to help him out. He also wants to offer Ivan his wise counsel, because he really has good advice on how to help Ivan find the Firebird. Ivan's hesitant about this. He doesn't totally trust his friend. So the friend takes the form of an owl, and kind of from a distance provides food and drink and builds a fire for him, and just kind of proves that he really is there to help him out. And so finally, when Ivan begins to trust the owl character, the owl offers his wise counsel. So then as the quest progresses, the friend takes on the form of a mouse. A mouse has a still, small, quiet voice, and is able to offer Ivan special advice in a small way that Ivan has to listen to carefully and quiet down and calm down. This story that I was intrigued with doing the design concept, actually ultimately as I was putting together the script for this, I realized that the script had the most interesting texture of all going on, because the character of the friend becomes more and more profound as the story develops. Ivan realizes it in the course of the story. Through the years, as I have been a puppeteer and chosen stories to develop as marionette shows, one of the things I really like is for a central character to change, to really grow and come to a different point in the story than he or she was at the beginning. And a good example of this is Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I really like it that Scrooge has such a transformation. And I have a number of other shows where maybe it's not quite as dramatic, but I really like it when a character goes from point A to point B in the course of a story. The journey to that place of change is very important to me. And I feel in the Firebird, Ivan's realization of who he really is, and his realization of who his friend really is, in really coming to him, initiating a friendship, and offering this incredibly versatile help to accomplish all these unusual tasks, and ultimately help Ivan to finally really look at himself in the mirror and see who he is. Incredible story texture here. So it's one of my favorite projects.